Hi guys, welcome back to another episode of Soulful Feast, bite-sized information to nourish your body, mind, and spirit. I'm your host, Stephanie Zubiri, and here's another solo episode for you guys. I've really enjoyed doing these solo episodes, so thanks so much for coming back and listening to this. And just want to share a little anecdote, right? Lately, I don't watch a lot of TV, but I do, they'll do the occasional movie, the occasional documentary, the occasional TV show. And I was on a flight recently, coming home, and I caught the Elizabeth Taylor The Lost tapes. And it's really amazing. It was produced by HBO and it's on Max. And if you can catch it, please do, because it shares such an intimate portrait of Elizabeth Taylor and her life. And I learned so much about this woman. And the thing is, if you think Elizabeth Taylor, what is the first thing that comes to your mind when you think of her? And for the most part, I think most of you will say is that she had 7 husbands and that she was divorced 8 times and married 8 times, twice to the same guy. And a lot of the media that is portrayed around her is about the jewelry she collected during those times. And, I was quite moved by the film because it just really goes to show how often women are misrepresented in media. Now, I'll come back to this story. But not too long ago, I also got bothered by the portrayal of the friendships of White Lotus, the 3 female friendships in White Lotus season 3. And if you look at these female friendships, if you haven't seen this season ending, I'm sorry, spoiler alert, because I'm going to have to talk about the season ending. But leading up to before the season ending, how many headlines were there about how toxic female friendships are, or don't go on a girls trip, or don't go to a girls trip with 3 people? Like, what? Why is it toxic? Why are female friendships toxic? And in the end was just this amazing sort of celebration of how profound and complex female friendships can be when Carrie Coon delivers this like really incredible monologue about how being vulnerable and being honest. And everyone's like, yeah, that was a great week. That was a great week. Like kind of smiling through it. And she's like, actually, no, I was like super sad the whole week. But, time is what gives purpose in this life. And, I'm just super happy to have a seat at the table. And we are so quick to judge women for every small thing that they do. But it's not quite the same with men. And sticking with the White Lotus scandals, again, like Aimee Lou Wood, she became famous as Chelsea in White Lotus, but also for her role in Sex Education. And the media just constantly obsesses over her teeth to the point that recently became a scandal with SNL doing like White POTUS. They did this whole skit about, the White House parody as White Lotus. And they made fun and poked political fun, Donald Trump and all of those people. But they poked fun at her teeth. There was nothing political about her punchline. Her punchline was her wide gap teeth. And it's really sad because women are boxed in by beauty standards and often judged by that. I mean, if she was a guy, would we obsess over it? Like, would that define her? Like, it's funny because people are actually championing Walton Goggins' receding hairline to the point that Turkish Airlines was like, oh, no, receding hairlines, because they do a lot of like hair implants in Turkey, right? But they're celebrating his flaws, but make fun of her flaws. Why does beauty flaws give character to a man, but then it's like a punchline for a woman? It's kind of sad. Going back to Elizabeth Taylor, which is actually really the crux to this podcast, I was really moved because so when I left my ex, my friend, it was already my second marriage and my second divorce, and one of my friends was like joking really close friend of mine was like, "Oh yeah, Stephanie, she's like our Elizabeth Taylor, collecting the engagement rings and and making a joke out of it like it's some glamorous thing." And I remember being really, really offended. But after watching the Lost Tapes, now I'm like, wow, if someone calls me Elizabeth Taylor, it's great because you know what? She went through this incredible journey, and what a strong woman. She's defined by the number of husbands, but we don't look at why she actually married and left them. Her first husband, Nick Hilton, she got married at a very, very young age, barely, I think, 18 or 19. Like, she's super young. And he was extremely violent and abusive to her and actually kicked her in the gut while she was pregnant that led to a miscarriage. I mean, nobody talks about this. They just talk about husband number 1, 2, 3, 4, whatever. Ooh, Elizabeth Taylor, like how scandalous, right? Like how scandalous is her life. But they don't talk about her in a complex way. She actually wasn't a loose woman. She didn't have like many affairs and many boyfriends and whatever. She would like fall in love and dedicate her life to one man until it all came crumbling, right? Her second husband was quite like an amicable separation. She wasn't quite ready. She was so young. She was like barely 20 or 19, I think. And she just had 2 kids and she just didn't know what to do with her life. And it was kind of difficult and still hurting and processing the trauma from the first relationship. And from what I watched, it was like a very amicable divorce, and they stayed friends. And he's the father of her first 2 children. And then she met the love of her life. Now that's like super exciting. The love of her life was Mike Todd, a big movie producer. And he was like just madly in love with her, that when she divorced her second husband, Michael Wilding, a British guy, she walked into his office, and he was like, I know you know that we are going to get married. And boom, she was so happy. She said it was the first time that really like the most joyful she had ever been. They were like each other's equals. They had a beautiful child. He loved her first 2 children. They had this beautiful family, and she was just finishing her contract with MGM at the time. And she had one more movie to do, and that was Cat on a Hot Tin Roof with Marlon Brando. And 2 weeks into filming that movie, so she was going to stop making movies after this movie. And what happened was 2 weeks into filming that movie, this was her last movie that she had in contract to do, Mike Todd died suddenly. Quite a tragic death. And so they had to pause filming the movie, and she was devastated. He wasn't even 50. He was like 48, 49. And the whole world had crumbled. Like she was going to leave the film industry and, this dedicate her life to being a mother and a wife. And it was all taken away from her. He died so suddenly. And she barely had time to grieve because they had to finish the movie. And she forced herself to go back to work. And when she went back to work, she found that she was able to take refuge from her pain and really inhabit the character. And she gave it her all. And it was easier for her to play a role than to be herself because of the grief that she felt. And it's so sad that the industry didn't even give her time to process her grief. So she turned into a lot of like partying and just sort of this lifestyle of trying to escape this trauma and grief from an abusive relationship, from the loss of her greatest love. And get this, at the height of her grieving, which made her the scandalous woman, Eddie Fisher, who was the best friend of her husband, Mike Todd, so Eddie Fisher is like a singer and actor as well, who was at that time married to Debbie Reynolds. Debbie Reynolds is the girl in Singing in the Rain. And, they were America's sweetheart, apple pie couple. And Eddie Fisher, I believe, made her a victim and preyed on her vulnerability and her aloneness and her grief. And she said in these lost tapes, and it's such an incredible documentary because the whole time it's just her talking. So these tapes are tapes made by the late journalist Richard Merriman. And it started when she was 32 years old in 1964, all the way until later years of her life. And they are just recordings, no video, just tape recordings, talking, asking questions about her life that was supposed to be for like an eventual book. And it's really just her reflecting on her life. And she says, I don't think I ever loved Eddie. He was just my connection to Mike, because he was Mike's best friend, and no one knew Mike more than Eddie and I could keep the memory of him alive. And he made a move on her, and that branded her as like a homewrecker, this scandalous woman. She turned to drinking and this really awful lifetime of, she had a hard time leaving this marriage because she already felt so much pressure of having failed marriages before. But it came to a point where she says that he would actually like stroke a gun on her skin and say, don't worry, I won't kill you. You're far too pretty. I mean, so much emotional abuse for this woman who never got to process trauma and grief, who never had anyone that held space for her. Anyway, without going through the rest of her husbands, then she finally left Eddie and met the second love of her life, which is Richard Burton. And fast forward to later in life when, they start talking about her as being heavy, being this, drug addict, this woman who was just like excessive. Her family intervened. She was about 60 years old, and they put her in the Betty Ford Clinic. And she was the first ever celebrity to go into rehab at the Betty Ford Clinic. And she went willingly, and she feels like it was so much love shown to her that they wanted her to get better. And, she really leaned into the therapy. She said it was like peeling back layers of an onion, and it was awkward at first, but I leaned into it. And at around 60, she turned around her life. And when she left the clinic, she said, for the first time in my life, I'm happy to be alone. I don't have a hole to fill. I mean, this woman really leaned into her own journey and really leaned into falling in love with herself. And when her best friend, Rock Hudson, passed away of AIDS, she actually founded AMFAR and became an advocate for AIDS. And she's one of the pivotal personalities to help get funding for AIDS research and to find a cure. But we don't think about that when we think about Elizabeth Taylor. People still think about her 7 husbands and her engagement rings and her beautiful jewelry. It's crazy. And I was just so inspired by this woman's life. And she dedicated her life, the rest of her life, to helping people, to being with her children, to finding a cure for this disease that at that time in the 90s, nobody knew. Really, it was consuming, the LGBTQ population at that time. And she was always a champion for them. Those were her best friends, right? Rock Hudson. Yeah, so it just gives us some points to think at how quickly people judge women. When I left my husband's, people always were quick to judge why, or that it was, rather than ask, that it was wrong. Like there was always these scandals related to it, or trying to butt their noses. I remember being told, what's going to happen to you? You're already twice divorced. Who's going to date you? What an awful thing to say, right? It's really sad. And you know, I want to ask you guys, how often do you find yourselves like a guiltily consuming gossipy media like that? Media likes a good female teardown. I can give you a number of names: Blake Lively, Meghan Markle. Like, I can't think of anyone in the same caliber of viciousness on the media as that's a man. Like, we just love to see a good woman fall. Why is that? It's so, so sad. Going back to Elizabeth Taylor, when she had this, she was filming Cleopatra in Rome, and that's when she met Richard Burton on set. And sidebar, by the way, she's the first ever movie star to get paid $1 million for the film and ask for a percentage of sales. It was unheard of at that time, and she released herself from the contracts and negotiated her own contracts. Nobody talks about Elizabeth Taylor as being a savvy ass businesswoman. So, sidebar as well. But when she was in Rome and her romance with Richard Burton was starting, it became so scandalous that the word paparazzi actually meant photographers running after Elizabeth Taylor. That's where paparazzi started. And that the Pope got involved and branded her as like this awful woman and that her children should be taken away from her. But nobody talks about the guy. Like, what about the men doing the bad stuff? Like, why is it only the woman? And it's very sad, right? So that scarlet letter, always reserved for women. So are you guys guilty of that? Like, are you guys guilty? Because I won't lie, like, I kind of got into the Blake Lively thing. And, the more you read, there's obviously so many sides of the story, but I didn't hate on her. Like, at the same time, it was like, nobody knows what's going on set except her. Who's to say that she wasn't uncomfortable, right? And just because she's an A-list actress, it doesn't mean that you're not put in an uncomfortable spot. And I've been made to feel uncomfortable. And, we've had these discussions with some amazing celebrities here that have always been women who've been put in an uncomfortable situation, regardless of their position of power, right? So I just find it sad, and hoping that, we can be a little bit kinder to each other. We love to say that like women are a lot kinder to each other, and I think in practice we are. I see that with my friendships. I see that in actually the social media world with my other friends who are KOLs and also content creators. We all support each other. We don't tear each other down. But it would be nice to see this change in mainstream media, that headlines don't pick on women just for their appearance or their scandals or their status or, wanting to tear them down. And yeah, it would be great to see more uplifting stories of women empowering each other. So, I feel like men are not judged the same way. Men are often judged by their achievements rather than their personal life, and are defined by their achievements rather than their personal life. But, we love to look at women by their personal life and their relationships. Yeah, that's it. I don't know what the point of this was, but maybe it's just to think about how we perceive each other and how we can promote a healthier conversation around it, and encourage you guys to look deeper and tell fuller stories, and never judge a book by its cover, and to apply it in your own personal life. When you meet someone, never feel like you have the full story. Don't be quick to judge people, because you never know what is going on inside, and you never know what is going on at home. Just have a little bit of compassion and a little bit of understanding. So if someone rubs you the wrong way, 2 things. Number 1, look at yourself. Why are you triggered by that? There's a reason. It's probably something you don't like in yourself or don't want to or have a trauma with. And number two, have compassion, because if they're projecting on you or not doing a good job at anything or making you feel bad or being mean, it's probably because they're going through something difficult in their life. And, we can just hold a little bit of space for that. Yeah, that's it. I'd love to hear your thoughts and comments. If there are any other films or instances that you felt that like you were wrongly judged, or if movies, that you felt didn't portray women or the community in that sense, I'd love to hear your thoughts. And frankly, if someone said, you remind me of Elizabeth Taylor, I will no longer take it as an insult, but as a compliment. Because, hey, this woman found the greatest love of her life in herself, and went on to help so many people. So yeah, with that, I'm Stephanie Zubiri. This has been Soulful Feast, bite-sized information to nourish your body, mind, and spirit.